This time on Cap and Castle's Laboratory, we're going to be working on Department 56 North Pole Series Toot's model train manufacturing, made in 2000. So it's a house that looks like a train. And this is supposed to turn. So it's a 120 volt house with a step down pigtail. So the light's right here. If I turn it on, train's not moving, but you can hear it. So the motor has failed. It's a synchronous motor. I don't know what motor it has because it's sealed. I've never opened this one before. I'm assuming it's a 120 volt, 40 millimeter synchronous motor, which might be a problem to get because 40 millimeter motors are hard to find, but we're going to see. First thing I do is figure out how to get into this thing. So this is a majority porcelain house or ceramic, depending on how you want to call it. But the bottom is solid and it's porcelain. Porcelain. A tap test will tell you what kind of material it is. You can hear the metallic, kind of hollow metallic sound. That's the porcelain. I'm going to stick the pigtail inside the hole so it doesn't teeter. But notice the sound difference? This is resin, resin, resin. So this piece, probably from the roof line up, is where our separation is going to be. I've been looking at this before I started filming, trying to figure it out, because this has the tightest seams I've ever seen. It looks like there's a seam right here, which there is. The problem is if I can lift the track, which you can see I can do that right here, because the track spins. What I mean, there's a seam right here is the track, but it looks like there's a seam. I wonder if part of the problem was they got this stuck in it, the snow. But the seam that I could see is right here along the edge of the roof line. The problem is I can't tell here where it meets the roof because of their paint job. And it looks like the chimney, or the stack, is possibly resined on. It looks like there might be a resin seam. This house is put together with really tight tolerances. This being wrapped inside does not help the motor. So if you use the fake snow, be careful. Try not to get it around the moving parts. The stack is not attached. So our separation is either going to be right here or right here at the stone. But they did a really good job on this one of painting it. So I don't know where the separation is. On most of their houses I can see the separation. It's pretty obvious. I don't see any reason to take the stack off at the moment. I think I see their separation. These columns are resined at top and bottom. So I'm thinking this roof piece comes off, which is the top or the front of the engine. But anyhow, so that's where we're going to start. We're going to try and figure out how we're going to open this. And this is what I do usually prior to starting videos. Is if I have never worked on one, I look around and poke. I'll use a screwdriver or a pick like this, because what I'm looking for is soft spots. Soft spots usually indicate resin or glue. And this house, which I haven't filmed anything on it yet, is really different, because even where the resin is that I can obviously see, like right here, it's hard. And it could be because of its age. It's 25 years old. So The resin may have cured to the point where it's no longer got its pliability. But this is what I do when somebody asks me how to open a house. If I've never opened one before, I just ask for close-up pictures so I can see the seams. And where I'm going to start is I'm going to get the front of this really hot. And when I say really hot is I'm going to use a heat gun. And we're going to blast heat all around because I still believe the front of this comes off. I don't see why the back would come off since the motor is literally right here. So there seems to be a seam right along here, right along here. Right here where the roof meets, it's hard to tell because of their glitter snow. Same with this side. I can definitely see a seam here all the way down. And then you can see that this is resined on, and this post is resined on, this post is resined on. This one doesn't look to be, but it has to be. You can see the resin on one ladder leg, but not on the other. So I'm going to assume that there's a seam right here where the stone face and the ceiling meet. That's where I'm assuming our seam is going to be. Let's get the engine sign out of the way. There we go. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start heating up in here and see if I can separate the columns one at a time. I'm hoping I can do this without removing the stack, but I have a funny feeling the motor probably hangs far enough down that I'm going to have to. Looking inside, I'm going to use a flashlight to look through the windows. I really can't see the motor much. They haven't really recessed. Matter of fact, yep, I should have looked closer with magnifiers doing this. The top of this is flat, so the motor is housed right in here, so this has to come off. I just got to figure out how much heat and how much prying I have to do. And this is where we're going to do it, so if you have this in the future, if I can heat this top piece off and it slides out, then we don't have to remove the stack. If it has to be lifted, we're going to have to remove the stack, because the gap right there, you see the gap? The gap is an 1/8 of an inch. So not very much. But anyhow, so that's where we're going to start. So I'm going to use the heat pen, and I'm not going to use a fine tip. Normally I would. Actually, I probably should. I'm doubting myself because this house, they don't make it anymore like most houses, and it's very expensive if you break it, like most houses. And it's a really nice house, and it's their blending is so good on this one between the porcelain and the resin pieces that there's no distinguishable seams. Now you may have this piece and say, oh, it's obvious, it's right here because yours has a different paint job. Different guy painted it, so maybe it was less meticulous, but this one was done really well. So I'm gonna fire up the heat gun. I'm gonna get probably fired up to about 330 degrees C, which is smoking hot, and I'm gonna work my way around. So it's probably gonna take some time, so I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna pause the video until I get it open, because it might take 2 minutes and it might take 30 minutes. It'd just be a waste of time. And I'll show you what I did once, of course, I get it open. And then if you don't have this piece, or you do, just make sure you're wary of your engine sign. So if you're going to heat the edge, you got to flip the sign up so you don't melt the resin where the pins are pressed in. So, anyhow, enough talking. It's been almost 10 minutes, and all I've done is poke around and show you things. So let me see if I can get it open and see what kind of motor it takes, and then see if I have one, and if I don't, see if I can get one on order. So we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're back. It has taken about 7 minutes to figure out how to take it apart. So there's a pro and a con to this. This is all ceramic. I thought it was resin. I've been heating it and I've been looking, and it's not separating. So I started on the glue joint here, and there's this long pole, which I didn't know was in there, which goes right here to help stabilize the resin stack. So once I got it to start to move, this wasn't hot enough, which was the train light, and instead of coming apart at the glue joint, it actually cracked right here. So it'll go on with glue, and it didn't chip the paint, so it blends right back in, which is nice. So to take it apart, you're going to have to heat the 56 and get this to separate. Apparently I didn't heat it enough, and it broke. And then you got to heat this resin joint. So apparently this whole thing is porcelain, except for this. And then this is threaded in. And wrapped around the threads, which is probably why the motor burned out, is more of that fluff. So this normally, you just screw it on. So the motor comes out through the top. You have to remove the stack. The machine will turn off in a minute in case it's annoying you. I did get it so hot to heat this up that it did start to peel the track. So we'll put a little dab of super glue when we're done and push the track back down. It's just a sticker. This motor is standard thread, so if I stick it back on, I just turn it to the right to screw this back on, like so. And then you can see it's on, won't fall off. And then you screw it to the left, or unscrew it, to take it off. This motor is very similar to the motors used on the Fezziwigs and the Stables and one other piece. So it's probably the same motor. And the motor does come out of this hole. It is resined in. So it's not a motor I have, most likely. So I'll have to order it, which isn't a big deal. But it's standard threads. So I'm letting you know it's standard threads. Now the next part is, you can see the resin, which is the resin glue they use. That's too much light. Which is the dark seam. You can see it kind of looks like maple syrup or something. And the biggest issue is it's resined all the way around, which means I have to get this entire casing really hot to separate it from this porcelain plate. So, and when this goes back on, you have to put the glue here and then walk this on until it lines up. So this pole, which is at an angle, that goes up. Do not bend it straight. That angle is because the hole in here is at an angle, so it can go above this piece. So it goes in and sits like that, you know, for the casting on the inside. So there's a bulge in the casting, which you probably can't see because of the shadow. You can kind of see the bulge, and that pin goes to right above the bulge. You can actually see the mark where the pin touches on the inside. So I had my heat gun at 330 degrees Celsius. If your heat gun only has like low, medium, high settings, do it on high and take your time. I thought I took my time because I heard the porcelain, I heard the resin right here cracking, but apparently it wasn't hot enough and it broke. But like I said, it's a clean break. When you stick it on, there's no gaps, which is nice. Didn't chip, little pieces everywhere. It does happen sometimes. It's a guessing game on how to take these things apart on some of the pieces, but it's not my intention to make it worse. So the next step is I got to superheat in here to get this motor to separate so I can pull it out of this hole. So I'm going to keep it at 330 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to start heating the resin glue. Just gotta wait for it to get back up to temperature. And now heating the edges is great, but the problem is they probably put a puddle in there and push the motor onto it, which means that heating the edges only breaks the edges down. It's the flat part underneath. And this is attached to porcelain. This is a complete porcelain house. It sounded like resin up here, but it's not. This is actually porcelain. It's apparently just because they have something glued to the inside, it didn't have the same sound as the rest of the house. The only thing resin on the house is the chimney or the stack. Unfortunately, I can't get this under, so I'm just heating the area. Oh, also when you do this, be careful. The off-gassing is horrible. The resin fumes are probably, causes cancer in California. Prop warning. And then this fake snow, when you're heating up around the edge of the roof, also starts to melt and off-gasses. Stinks. It's a plastic or acrylic type material. This is where the fine tip nozzle comes in handy, because I can get it into the crevice. I'm bouncing it off the inside to push the heat into the motor, since the motor is underneath the porcelain. The nice thing about porcelain is it can handle a high temperature, since it is fired in a big heater. But I need to get this resin to get back to its liquidy state so I can pull it up. Some of it's getting pliable. The amount of heat I'm pumping in here, be careful. The outside of the house will get warm, like right where my knuckles are. You can feel the temperature difference from over here. And then this motor, being metal, is going to get real hot. What, 330 is what? 500 degrees Fahrenheit? It's a lot of heat. Another thing you might try is throw this in the oven. I've done it on solid porcelain pieces before. I set the oven for a couple of 100 degrees and I let it cook for 30 minutes. I'll check it every like 10 and see if the glue starts to break down. So far, this is probably one of the harder houses I've worked on. It's pretty simple as far as its design, but it's very hard to get into without potentially breaking it. And the access is very limited. And a basic heat gun with a wide nozzle will just produce a lot of heat in a general area if you can't pinpoint the heat. And this is why I paused the video before, is because this is what takes so long. There's no movement on this motor. I'm going to have to get this porcelain really hot so it'll start breaking the adhesion from the base of the motor. I do appreciate when people give me pieces I've never worked on to try. I mean, I don't like it when they break or crack, but because there's so many pieces out there, I won't be able to do them all. There's tens of thousands of animated houses made over the past, what, 50 years that they've been doing animated houses. for Christmas or Halloween or Easter, Valentine's, so on and so forth. So I might pause it again, and then just time it like I was doing to see how long it takes to get this motor hot enough to break free. Still no movement. I thought there was. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it again, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch and see how long it takes to get enough heat in here to break this resin. So, be back in just a moment. Okay, I just got the motor out. Literally a few seconds ago. The motor is really warm. So here's the motor. It's just a small little pancake synchronous motor. The sticker with the information stayed. I got the motor so hot it delaminated the sticker and not the it delaminated the sticker from the motor and not the whole thing from the resin. So there's the Mylar backer. But even though I didn't get it completely off, I can read this. It's backwards, but it says 120 volts AC, 60 hertz, 6 RPM, 3.7 watts CCW. So even though it's backwards, I can read it. I learned that backwards reading. So I'll bring it up here so you can see it. AC, 120 volt, 60 hertz, 3.7 watt. 6 RPM, counterclockwise rotation, and the part number of the motor is an AM06 made by Hyai and Ying, and the motor model number was E181521. And this is what I'm talking about. You see, this is all the resin. The resin has captured the ink. That's what I'm talking about. You have to get this so hot to break all this resin free. I was able to get the motor so hot it delaminated the sticker, which is good, because I can then get the motor out. Ooh, yeah, she's still hot. So this appears to be the same motor they use on, like I said, Fezziwigs and the Stables and the other piece that I just forgot. It's a ballroom, the ballroom. It's like a ballroom like Fezziwigs, but it's not Fezziwigs. So I'm going to cross-reference it and see if it's the same. The important thing is the thickness of this motor, besides the RPM. It's not as important. The counterclockwise rotation and the thickness of the motor is the important part, because if the motor's thicker, it's going to lift the track up, and as you remember, I only have about an 1/8 inch of room right here. So there's not a lot of room for discrepancy. This, if we need to remove all this resin, depending on the thickness of the motor, I can get it hot and then scrape it out slowly. Sometimes if you let it recool, because we got it hot, I mean it's warm, it's probably 100 plus degrees still. When it cools, sometimes it'll start to crack and you can chip it out. But you can see it's still pliable, so I can flex it. It's kind of like flexing Jello, because it's still pliable. So this is a process to do. It's not something you're going to get out and done in 10 minutes. This is going to take you a better part of an hour or so. But I'm going to, this motor is, she's still hot, but not so hot I have to throw it down now. But just to show, we'll plug the motor back in. Oops. And we'll screw the track back on. It's probably working now because I got it really hot. But you can hear the motor. Also, I'm letting it thread all the way down. I'm letting the motor thread the thing all the way. careful when you're doing that, because if you touch those, you're going to get a tingle. Actually, it's not threading. It's physically stopped. The motor is not turning anymore. I'm stopping the motor with just touching it. So the motor is bad. A synchronous motor has a lot of torque. You shouldn't be able to stop them. Also, it's leaking. The grease inside is coming out. So, it does need a motor. Now I just got to find one. So I'm going to see if I can find one. And I may not have one, and if I don't have one, then I'll start the video back up when it shows up, because I'm making a motor order today. So if they have one in stock, I will get it put on my order, and then I'll have it in usually 5 days. So anyway, now we know how to take it apart, and we know what it is. Now we just got to get around to fixing it. At the minimum, that motor should be turning the other direction like it's trying. But it's not. So, alright, I'm going to do some motor checking. I'll be right back with an answer whether I have one in stock or if I have to get one on order. And then after that, we'll get it put back together. Okay, we're back. It's not assembled. I just put the pieces back on it because I'm going to put it back in its box. I just got off the phone with Happy Holiday Parts. This motor is the same motor that they used the Fezziwigs ballroom, as well as the other ballroom piece that I can't remember the name of. So I'm going to go ahead and order this today, and I should have it in a week, and we can get this thing reassembled and glued back together. So this is the 120 volt right hand thread motor, which Happy Holiday Parts has under Fezziwigs, because Fezziwigs uses the same motor. At the time, Department 56 put the same motor in a couple of pieces. So this is now the 4th piece that I've come across that uses the same motor. The motor I do have is this one, which is too big. It's also wrong direction. So this motor is a clockwise rotation. You probably can't see it with the glare. Well, this is counterclockwise. Also, when I say too big, is you can see how much taller it is, so it won't fit. The threading is the same. Also, the nose, or the output shaft, is much taller. So this motor could work, but it can't work. Worst case is you have to cut a hole in the porcelain and drop it. But since this motor is still available, I'm going to order that motor. So I did go through my motors. This is the closest thing I have. It's not going to work, so we're going to order the correct one, and we'll continue when that thing shows up in a week. If I order it today, I'll usually have it within about 5 business days. So that means I should have it by the beginning of next week. So, or maybe this weekend, depending on how fast the postman is. So, this is where we're going to pause until I get the motor. We'll put her back together, test her out, glue it all back together. When I do glue it back together, I'm probably not going to use a resin glue. I'm probably just going to use super glue. It's a little easier to dismantle and less likely to cause an issue with the train light. So, but anyhow, that's where we're at. And when you do get the motor doesn't come with this. So you have to slice off the insulation, which I'll show you, and solder on the connectors so you have your pigtail. So, all right. I'll be back next week. We'll continue where we're leaving off on this one. Okay, we're back with the train house here, or the Toot model train manufacturing house, if you want to be more specific. There is the original motor. I got the closest I could find motor from Happy Holiday Parts. It's the same thickness. It's got the same connectors. I already soldered it on. This motor, though, I think is mislabeled. It says it's a 5.6 RPM, 50, 60 hertz, 100, 120 volts AC, CCW. It probably helps if I'm in camera. I was trying to read it without, so I wouldn't get the glare. And that's basically what this is. Problem is CCW, counterclockwise. It's spinning clockwise. So it's either a mislabeled motor, or it was a defective from the manufacturer, meaning the company that made the motor hooked it up wrong. Reversing the connections don't matter, it's AC. So Not a problem. Everything can be rectified. So, but before I go any further, let me show you the difference in the motors. So, this motor had a threaded shaft that threaded in here. It's this little guy here. And then this was glued into the bottom of the train. Like so. The replacement motors that I can find that's closest, they already have a shaft. And the issue is, if I thread this into the old motor that's broken, just so you know, while I was waiting for this motor, I opened this up, and it's not an internal part that's broken. The actual windings are bad, which is why this motor doesn't work at all. And when we look at it sideways, you might notice that that went a little bit taller. Now, a couple ways to solve this problem. So, first thing, if we slide this on to its pole and seat it, there's a gap underneath. Now, the question is that gap tall enough to compensate for this? And that's what we're going to find out. Oh, also, this is the OEM motor, and this edge is all sharp, and that's because they all come with these wings. So before I started to make it quieter, I cut the wings off. If you watch any other videos where the motors, they screw in, this one glues in. So you have to cut the wings off. I use a Dremel. You can use a hacksaw or whatever tool you want. But when you clamp the motor into a vise, just make sure you don't clamp it too hard to damage the motor. So let's see if this is going to work, meaning that our height is going to permit us to do this. So this is more like the worst case scenario. You know what I should do? I should probably screw this on up top. When you pull this out, if you take a drill bit and clean out the glue, the hole, you can actually make threads by just turning this and having the metal shaft cut threads into the plastic, which is kind of nice. I just used a small drill bit to clean out the glue residue that from this when it was stuck on the other one. If you don't have a drill bit, you can use a pick or something just to get in there to remove this type of glue. So I'll pop this thing in like so. And now we're going to have to turn it on so I can move the train. Actually, do I have any more thread left? I might be able to turn the train just a little more. Yes, I can. So the answer is no. The extra height is going to cause a problem. See, I could have tried all this before I turned on the camera, but then you wouldn't see the process and how I do this. So I didn't test fit it before, I promise you. Okay, so there's a couple ways to fix this. First, we're going to unscrew this. So, and then we're going to get some sort of measuring device. You can use your finger, a piece of paper. I'm going to use a ruler or a rule. The new shaft from this standoff to the top of the threads is 1/2 inch. On this one, from this standoff, let me screw this in all the way. That way it's more accurate. So, 1/4, 16, it's 5/16. So we got 3/16 of a height difference, which is quite a bit. That's almost a 1/4 inch. So if we were to move a 1/4 inch or 3/16, that would bring us right to the bottom thread. That might be a problem. There may not be enough surface area to have this bond. So we have a couple options, and I'll go over the different ones with you. And this depends on what you want to do with your piece to make it work. Now, this covers the center of the track. So keep this in mind when I go over the first option. You take a drill bit and you bore out that hole to where it comes through the sticker on the top. And then you countersink the hole and you get a little nut that fits on these threads, and you remove this standoff right here, this piece of plastic. This piece of plastic is, I'm going to put my ruler away prematurely here, 3/16 of an inch. So if you don't want to do anything major, you literally just cut that off. Dremel, grinder, razor knife, whatever, drill bit, and you drill a hole straight through. I drill the hole first if you want to go that route. Stick this through and then just use a small machine nut that matches these threads. I had one up here, right there, like that. And then this one's for one size smaller shaft. I was getting out some small nuts. But then you can tighten this onto here, and you can see there's holes in the bottom. See, there you go. Now you can see. It's hard to tell in the viewfinder if the light shows the holes or not, but there's 2 holes in the bottom of this that the nut technically could recess inside if it's a little bit larger. Worst case, you can also oval out the holes because this is resin. So that's option number 1. If you want to go a little bit more entailed, option number 2 is to grind this shaft down to where the shaft fits inside that plastic piece. To do that, I would use a Dremel and the sanding disc and just go around it continuously until it fit, or you could use an angle grinder, but the vibrations might be a little bit more excessive, and because it's so large, it may take up too much room. You can go old school and use a file and sit here for hours, or unless you're really good at filing, and file this down. But that's probably the way I'm going to do it, not the file. I'm probably going to end up cutting off the threads, because the threads are 3/16 of an inch. The threads are the same depth as the white standoff, and then shove this inside the hole and glue it. So that'll take care of making it the right height so it doesn't hit the smokestack with the train cars. Now, the second issue is, let's say you cannot find a CCW, or they send you one that's mismarked, and you need to go, well, my train's not backing up around the building, I need it to go forward. Well, if you look at these train cars, they're not connected to each other. You can, and they're just held on with a little dab of glue around each of the trucks or the wheels, and you can heat it up and you can separate them. There's so little glue I can actually flex it, see? And then you just take the cars and you reverse the train and the caboose. You probably don't even have to deal with the one in the middle that's hauling the trees, and that's because it's a unidirectional car. So I would just pop that one off and that one off, and then mirror them over to the other side and call it good. Tack it back on with a little dab of glue, and there you go. Now your train's going the other direction. I was debating on trying to get this exchanged for one that actually is CCW, but the turnaround would be close to 2 weeks, and I've already had this thing for 2 weeks. And I'd like to get it done and sent back to the owner. Time wasting. There's another option, which is a lot more entailed, and I might look into it just to save on a little bit of time. And that is, you open the motor, and then there's a stopper that's pre-built into these motors so they can only go in one direction, and see if they put the stopper on the wrong side. And And that is another option. What I'll do is, if you've never seen it before, if you haven't seen the videos where I've opened these up to take the gears out or try and fix them or change the shafts, because sometimes they're interchangeable. If you can get, this was made by On-Yi. This motor is not. If you could find another On-Yi motor, but it had a different output shaft, you could swap the output shafts. Because it's the same company, they usually use the same insides. So you'll need something to pry up the locking tabs. I'm going to use a pair of wire cutters here, because you need something that's strong but yet has a point to grab underneath the tab and bend them up. Now be aware that if you have a nice set of wire cutters, you're going to dull and or chip the teeth and it won't cut right. I used to use stuff like this, but then I started breaking the tips off. This is a relatively cheap set from Menards. It's good stuff, but I don't use these so much for cutting wires as I use these because they have a flatter cut point. Once you do that, and you get them all flattened, you try and find where there's a gap. There's a small gap right here, and without stabbing yourself, because trust me, it will happen, you want to try and pry up the edge. So you just need to find something rigid and small enough to get inside here. Once you do that, just walk it up and you can pull your cover off. So here's your cover. You got your output gear with your output shaft. You can see the black grease from it breaking down. Like I said, I've already opened it, so the tabs are a little easier to remove because I've already done it once. But I did smash the tabs back together because when I send these to the recycler, they prefer them not to be open. You can pull out a couple of the gears that are going to be in your way. So those two, matter of fact. And then this is the one that has the stopper on it. See that blue thing right there? This is what tells the motor what direction to spin, if it's a single direction motor. If you remove this piece from a one that says CW or CCW, the motor will spin in each direction every time you give it power. So it'll go counterclockwise when you first turn it on, and then clockwise the next time you turn it on, and vice versa. Or if it gets stuck, it'll auto reverse. So that is what I'm talking about, the stopper or the paw, or whatever they refer to it as. I think they call it a paw. I could be wrong. Anyhow, here's the armature. And what that little paw does is, if you can see, there's a T-bone looking shape right here. This paw on the gear presses up against that T-bone shape. So if the motor tries to turn the other direction, this paw won't permit it. It actually gets caught on a piece of metal that's in here that's protruding. So if you look right there, you see that little protrusion? That holds the paw from going the wrong way. So that guarantees every time you turn on this motor, it always spins in the same direction. So I have a funny feeling this one, when they put it in, the paw's on the wrong side. So, because it only turns clockwise, and it should turn counterclockwise. But the chances of you having that happen are probably pretty slim. I mean, I've ordered hundreds of motors, and I've had, this would be the third one that's been mismarked. The other two weren't mismarked in the sense of how they spun or what they did. They said 60 hertz DC, and that was confusing me because DC doesn't have a hertz. Although it does hertz if you get zapped by a high quantity of it. Sorry, cheap pun. But anyhow, and if you hooked up the DC, the motor would just go and it wouldn't go anywhere. And then when you hook up to AC, the motor would spin. So they mismarked all the motors as DC motors, and they're AC motors. And that's not a big deal. I kind of figured they were mismarked, but I wanted to see what happened when you put DC to them, just because I've never heard of a DC reversing synchronous motor before. But maybe something will change. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Dremel and I'm going to slice off the threads, and I'm going to chuck this up in a vise, and I'm going to go around it with the Dremel sanding drum and just wear this shaft down to where it is gonna fit in here. I'm gonna do that off camera because when it's loud, and two, it's not gonna be in like 30 seconds. And you're gonna want to take your time for two reasons. One, you don't want to screw up, and two, you do not want to generate so much heat that it transfers through into the motor down this shaft right here into the nylon gear. So you're going to want to grind and then stop. Let the metal cool down a little. Grind and then stop. Let the metal cool down a little. You don't want the heat to transfer into the nylon gears that are inside these boxes or cases, however you want to refer to them as. But that's the whole thing, is we want to salvage the motor, but we're going to modify it to fit. So if you go on to Happy Holidays parts and you type in, this is the same motor that's in Fezziwigs and one or two other pieces, but if you type in Toots, this is the motor you'll get, and it has it listed in 2 directions and 2 voltages. It's always 120 and it should always be right-handed threads. It doesn't matter if you have to drill it out, whether the threads are right or left-handed, but the voltage is very important, and you're gonna have to modify the motor, because as of this time, a flat mount thread-in motor of this thickness, that's the problem that we were having, is this thickness. This motor is only 9/16 of an inch thick. All the motors that had that thread-in hole that the shaft threaded into, the motors were almost 3/4 of an inch thick. This is porcelain. We can't grind it down to make it recess further in. And of course that extra height does the same thing that this is doing. It's going to push this disc up into this. This notch here, so the train can go behind it. What's happening is it's pushing it high enough that if I put this disc flush, the train is actually rubbing right here. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to rub. So that's why we have to do a little modification to get this back up and doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm telling you what I'm going to do, but I want to give you some other options for those who have more time or want to try some more of a challenge. You can do multiple different things as far as grinding, opening up the motor, reversing your train cars, notching this out for a nut if necessary, drilling that out for a nut. We just have so many different choices we have available to make this function again. This doesn't just go for this piece. This is any piece that is obsolete in the eyes of the manufacturer, and they don't make a replacement motor for it anymore, which is pretty common on most pieces. Usually after a year or two, there's no more motors left. If they order 100,000 units that take this style motor, the manufacturer will make 101,000 of those motors to compensate for defects, and that's it. Then that run's done and they'll retool for a different motor. So that's why it's so hard to find parts. But there's always the ability to modify it and make it work. So I'm going to go ahead and get to grinding. I'm going to use this fiber wheel to cut off the threads first. Then I'm going to grind down the shaft itself until this slides over it. And then I'll just put another dab of glue on it to hold it, just like I did on the OEM. So anyhow, I shall return with a ground down armature, or actually it's not even an armature, a ground down output shaft, and then we'll go to the next step of the process. Okay, I'm back. All I did was sit it in here for clearance, but if I turn it on, it stops because it's I didn't glue the shaft on, but it does turn and it does clear. So I'm going to pull it apart now so you can see what I did once the train gets behind the chimney there. So slide that back off, pull it out. So I ground it down with a stone. The sanding disc wasn't doing it because it's hardened steel. So I used the stone. And I ground it down with coarse stone, then I smooth it with a fine stone. So it now has a, you can see it's tapered. And the reason I did tapered is I was going to do square and make it a tighter fit, but then with square, if I were to push this in with adhesive, the adhesive would create a, it would have nowhere to go, so it would create a bumper at the end, which would then lift this back up. With it being tapered, as it squishes in, it can run down. That was my reasoning behind it. But it took, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of trying different materials to grind this down. I used a coarse stone on the Dremel, followed by a fine stone. I started with the sanding disc, but I ended up burning off the sanding disc before I even scratched this, because again, this one's hardened steel. The original one is a mild steel. The sanding disc will grind it down and no problem. So, but anyhow, so the motor is now right size, right fit, wrong direction. Well, if I open this motor and I can't get the paw to reverse, or that's not the problem, there's a chance I could damage the motor and it will never work again. And then I'd be out the cost of a motor. Just so you know, these things aren't cheap. They're like $40 a piece. So it's one of those, do I want to do it? Since I've already cut the wings off, they may not take it back. Because I cut the wings off assuming it was going in the right direction, since it says counterclockwise. So I'm going to just go ahead and reverse the caboose and the engine, and I'm going to see if they'll come up without tearing the sticker. There's the glue there. There's some glue here. If it's a minor tear, it's not too big of a deal because the train will cover it. But I don't want it to be a big tear. Also, what I'm doing with the X-Acto knife is I'm cutting the glue, scoring it, so it gives it a point to where it can separate. You know, normally I'd use a spudger. I don't want to use heat because just using heat to take this thing apart, the sticker started to curl. It's just a decal. I mean, technically you could probably print another one, but let's not try and do more work than necessary. Alright, so caboose is off. This engine has a lot more glue than the caboose and the other car. That's interesting. Alright. Well, at least it does on the outside. The inside doesn't have very much. Okay. If I put that one there, it should cover the white spot. Yep. And then if I put the caboose, make sure there's, yeah, its caboose is unidirectional too. And it'll cover the white spot. So, that's good. Use whatever you want for glue. I'm going to do a dab of Gorilla. I like the brush. It lets me smooth it out. I wouldn't use hot glue, only for the fact that hot glue being a thicker medium, it's going to lift the glue. Or excuse me, the glue is going to lift the train. That's not what I meant to say. The glue is going to create it to lift. Wow, brain's working slower than my mouth. Alright, there's that one. And go. There we go. You can see there's no white from the sticker. This, when I glue it in, it's going to take several hours of cure. I use this Gorilla Glue Clear. This stuff has like several hour cure time if I remember right. I always let it sit for a minimum of 6. 12 is usually preferred, but let me read it while this one's curing before we go to the next step. Full cure in 24. Objects can be solid in 2 hours. Best room temperature. Working time is 5 minutes. Yeah. So 2 hours is the time. Damp it, glue it, clamp it. Not really ever damped it before, but not on any of these. This is also what I'm going to use to glue it onto here. This stuff, they've changed the container. It used to be a flat, looked like an old Elmer's glue container. Out of all the different hard glues I've tried that aren't like Elmer's or wood glue type stuff, this has the best of strength. It's going to suck when this burns out, but hopefully it doesn't burn out for another 25 years. Because, right, this is from 2000. Yeah. So, you know, 25 years, this would be that color and come apart. So, now, because there's no wings on this motor, when the motor is inside, it wants to rotate because the wire is pulling it and pushing it. So just so you know, because the hole right there that the wire comes out of is not in a straight line. It's off to the side. So this wire being rigid, when you put it in, is trying to cock the motor sideways. That's not good. If it cocks the motor sideways, this disc is now off to one side. So I was trying, before I turned it on and it was catching, I was trying to bend the wire to relieve the stress so I can feed it through down there and call it good. But let's go ahead and glue this in, and then we're going to let it sit, and then we'll continue later after a couple hours of this curing. So a couple of dollops. Would not recommend using your finger, but a popsicle stick or a swab to, or even a cheap paintbrush to smooth it out. You don't want a big glob because you want that glob getting inside those 4 white areas. So I'm going to, you have 5 minutes, it says that you can work with this stuff. So I'm going to smear it on and even it out and get to the edges. You can try chiseling out the old glue. I tried. I'm afraid of snapping the porcelain because the old glue is really adhered to the porcelain, because the porcelain is more porous than the metal of the motor. So it's going to adhere better to the porcelain than the motor. Things don't generally stick to metal as well as they do other materials. And that's just due to the bonding principles. Usually it's because it's porous or not. All right. We're basically committed, so let's get this in. So looking inside, you want to center the motor, and how I do it is the edges of the wings, where the wings used to be, there's 2 of those tabs that fold in that I knocked off on the other one. To open it, as I take the porcelain backing and then I make sure that they're equidistant. Just use something for a reference. Even this post is off center, so using the post would be useless. The post is a little off to looking at from the front, the left. But another way you can do it is, once you think you have it centered, just drop the disc on top, if you're doing the way I'm doing it here, and then see if the disc fits in the groove or the circle that it's supposed to sit on. So if you look right in here, you'll see there's a flat spot for this disc just barely right above. And if it's not right, just turn the motor a hair, because you can't move it side to side. All you can do is rotate it. Since the armature is not centered, it'll swing it out to one side or the other. And there. Now it's centered on that raised section. So I'm going to let her sit and cure. Just make sure I squeeze all the air out of it. There you go. So my reference of center is a hair off from what center actually is according to this disc. There you go. Make sure I didn't move it. Nope, she's still good. Okay, so now we just need to wait a couple hours for the next step. This is why some of the videos take forever, because there's curing times, especially when you're using the resin type glues that take hours to physically cure. But not a problem. Once that's done, I'll put a dab of it in this hole and squish that on. When you put this on, and I'll remind you when we do it, you want to make sure the train's against the back so you can slide this down the shaft. Then I'll use the same glue, these, on the shaft to re-adhere this to there. And then I'll use super glue here. The reason is the same thing. This glue is thicker, so when it dries, it can change the height width of something. The super glue doesn't expand when it dries, or it does. It's very, very minimal. In that way, as you can see, there's no expansion. Train cars, perfect. That's the nice thing about the super glues. So if you only have super glue on hand, just smear it in there, squish it down, and hold it for 30 seconds or so before you let it do its thing. Make sure it's centered, of course. And then you can go on to the next step. The only reason I don't like using super glues around certain components is super glues, when this motor gets hot, the super glue will break down faster than the Gorilla resin type glues or other brands. The other reason don't want to use the super glue here is because we live in Arizona, we get really hot, and if this is in storage where the storage reaches almost 200 degrees, this super glue that I stick on here and here will get brittle and crack. The resin glue, less likely to. And then that's gluing plastic to paper. You don't need anything super strong, just something to hold it. So, okay. Be back in your world in an instant, in my world in about 2 hours or so. Okay, it's been a few hours and nice and solid. So, next step is we're going to glue this on, but make sure she's still centered. Which, if it wasn't, it would suck right now. And put a little dollop on it, let it work its way down inside the hole. Got a little spill over here. Just wipe that off. And then let's try and quickly put it on before it drips out. Wasn't as quick as I'd like, but it's on. Now, as far as this goes, you can see the line where it was glued. just going to put a little on there, following the line, like that. And now we just need to make sure we get this thing level and seated. There you go. Now, to stop this from moving, because it wants the tip from one side to the other, I'm going to use some painter's tape so we can cure it for a couple hours. What this should do is help keep a little bit of tension on it and keep it standing straight up. Just checking my clearance and making sure she's square. She's not. I need to adjust it just a little bit. There we go. So this is the process that usually takes the longest on some of these, where we're reassembling and then we have to do all the gluing. So now I'm gonna let it sit like this probably till tomorrow, because it's 7 o'clock where I am and my bedtime's coming up fast, since I get up about 4 in the morning every day. So we're gonna let this sit overnight, and then tomorrow we'll make sure it all works, and then I'll glue the light back on, or the 56 symbol. Be a light on a real train. But it should cure. Gravity will hold this in place to where it cures the disc, and then the tape will hold this in place to where it cures the stack or the chimney. And then once that's done, we'll plug it in. We'll remove the tape first. We'll plug it in and go from there. But I want you to see the process where we do all the small stuff, which is the gluing. On some of these pieces where you have to glue it together, that's the longest process. If it's a, like the Limax Nutcracker, we have to remove the big base. I let it sit for 24 hours before I even touch it, because that piece weighs like 14 pounds or something. It's some ungodly heavy base. The whole assembly, not just the base, is 14. So when I use the Gorilla Clear Glue, I glue it and I set it, and I usually put some weight on it. Usually I use a battery or a block of metal, something to keep it pressed, and I will not touch it for 24 hours because it's so massive. I don't want somebody grabbing the house and then having the base fall and then breaking something like the base or your foot. So something like this can sit for a few hours and it's fine. You're not going to be carrying this around by this chimney. But I'm going to let this one sit overnight, so figure 20 hours, because I won't work on it till after I get off work tomorrow. We'll finish it up then. So other than that, we're almost done. And this, like I said, was the extreme where we had to change the rotation and grind it down. And hopefully we'll get the right motor in the future. If we ever come across another one of these, this is the first one I've ever seen, to be truthful. I didn't even know it existed. And in that case, we don't have to do as many modifications. But this just shows you what's available to what you can do to make it work so you have your house back. And maybe it's slightly custom because it's going the other direction, or you added a light, something like that. But anyhow, we're going to finish this up tomorrow, and then if everything's all good, I'll package it up and let the owner know. And then, of course, I'll send it to the editor so we can get it up on YouTube. So that way y'all can watch it and see some of the stuff that I have to do that I don't do on camera all the time because they're pieces I've already worked on that also need customization. Like this real quick. I know you've seen this worked on before, but if you know this piece, I did 2 of these recently, back to back, as a matter of fact. Anyhow, fully custom to rebuild the insides because they don't make the motor anymore, including the one I made on the other video, but the process is still the same. Anyhow, this piece will be a future giveaway. It's fully functional, so you're getting a sneak peek right now. It is used, but it's been fully rebuilt. That's why some of the sticker is damaged, because it was on a full display. But this will be a future giveaway, so stay tuned as we get closer to the summer months before, you know, Christmas. You can get yourself a chance at winning the Yummy Gummy Gumdrop Factory from 2004, which was part of their North Pole series. A little sneak peek here. But on some of these pieces, you just have to customize them a hair to fit the new motors that are available since the OEMs aren't. That's basically what I was going for. Anyhow, let's finish this up tomorrow and get this back to its owner. So once it's done, we'll plug it in. We'll do the low light thing so you can see how this lights up through the windows and stuff, and she'll be finished. And then we'll work on our next one. Well, it's been 24 hours. Well, 21. But it's the next day, and apparently my tape has come off overnight. But let's peel it off and see what we have. The disc doesn't move freely, so that means that adhered. And the gap looks good. So let's see if we were able to complete this. Because if not, I gotta get it really hot and break it free. Like I said, that Gorilla Glue is some strong stuff. There we go. We'll do 1 revolution. Look at, nope. Apparently it's off just a little bit. So what's rubbing? So the engine is rubbing. Let me see if I can see where it's touching. Right there. Okay, not a problem. And that's why we do things and test them, but unfortunately because it hadn't cured, I wasn't able to test it. So I have the engine just cocked a little too much on the inside edge of the track, and the caboose is barely touching as well. And it looks like the disc broke free, so the glue didn't hold. So that's going to pose a small problem. That's why we test things. So it rubs right there. All right. And the caboose rubs at the top. So the bottom of the train, I need to pull the train out. It's not square to the track. And the caboose, when I glued it, apparently it glued instead of straight up and down, it's at an angle. So the very top edge is rubbing the inside. Both of those are relatively easy to fix. What's going to be hard to fix is I need to remove this stack again to try and re-adhere this. That's where we're going to have a problem because of the new glue. I was hoping it would have worked, but it didn't. So now we're going to see if I get any flex. Nope. And I guess we're going to get it really hot. So I'm going to start at 300 degrees centigrade to fire this thing up. And we'll go from there. Just to save on time, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while I reheat this and pull this back out. Because it could take anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes of slowly heating this seam on both sides to get it to separate. So, save on some time on the video. That way it's not 16 hours long. I'm going to heat it and pull it off. And then I'll adjust the cars and we'll do it again. So, be back in just a moment. Okay, it actually only took about 3 minutes of heat to get the glue to separate. Turned it back into a sticky mess, and I just used that sticky mess to re-adhere the chimney. I added a little drop to it as well, of course, because it apparently didn't fully cure. And then the disc itself, even though it broke free because it rubbed the chimney, it was still liquid. It never adhered. It literally, when I pulled the disc off, it ran down. It never bonded, either because there was no water, as it talks about, or it's because no air. Because once that stud goes into the hole, the air can't get in there, so it can't dry. So I cleaned it out with a cotton swab stick, and I used the super glue this time. The super glue actually does save metal bonding. And then I've had it running while it was curing, and I don't think she's rubbing anymore. I'm just going to double check because she is spinning pretty good. I also got my auxiliary light on to give me more light. So now it's going to have to sit for a while for it to rebond, hence the 3M tape to stop the stack from falling forward. So yeah, that's great. But not everything goes as planned. Sometimes you have hiccups, and then you just have to redo it. But I got the Dremel out so I could clean up the residue, clean off some of the plastic, grind down. The steel shaft had a big coating on there, and I just used the sanding drum and went around it real quick to get me back to raw steel. So sanding drum, hence that's why that's out. But yeah, that's unfortunately sometimes you get a little setback. And it's not major, but it is a setback because now I have to wait for it to rebond. I think it's taken care of. I'm almost considering gluing this back on just because I think we're good. But I'm going to wait until the chimney or smokestack cures completely before I do that. So the tape isn't under a huge amount of stress. All the tape is doing is there's enough tension on the tape to stop it from falling forward and having the front of the stack press onto the rotating disc. So it's not doing a lot. It's just holding it from tipping. Because when I was testing it to see where the rubbing was, it was because the stack had tipped. I didn't move the trains at all. The 3 cars are still exactly where they were when I paused the camera. All I did was realign this, and now the stack is more straight and not tipped. Being tipped, it was tipped forward, so the bottom was back, and with the bottom back, the train cars are rubbing. So even though I taped it, and as I showed you when I turned on the camera, the tape came off because I didn't look at it. I've been at work all day. It must have happened overnight, and then the whole thing just went whoop with gravity. So Probably should have used something like a screwdriver and wedged it under the front to help keep the front up. I might still do that because it's still wet. So I'm going to turn it off, and then I'll just do that, and we'll let it cure. So what that'll do is it's just a little bit of tension underneath the front so it can't droop if the tape comes apart again. The tape isn't really taped to the house, it's taped to the front here, and then it's just enough tension, like I said, it's taped to itself. I know it's really loose looking, but it actually stops this from moving. But yeah, because see, if I move it, it wiggles. Hopefully I didn't shift it out of alignment. Apparently that's too much pressure. I need something slightly smaller, not as long. There's too much lever action. There we go. Now I'm just looking at the train to make sure we have an equidistant, and the stack is now centered. So now we just need to let it cure again. So if it doesn't work the first time, try it again. The nut on the top might be the best option, so you don't have to deal with the alignment causing the train cars to break the glue free. This is just a measuring device to measure gauges of wire and stuff, so it's nothing special. It's just a flat piece of metal I got that's been laser cut, and anyway, it's the right gap I need, so I'm gonna let this sit for a few hours and come back and check it. And hopefully at that point it's good. I'll glue the 56 back on the front, put the light bulb in it, and you can see what this looks like in low light. So hopefully for the last time, one more pause. Okay, it's been a few hours. I probably got some wires caught, but this is hardened. The whole thing's moving, and I got that glued on, and you can see it's running. So let's do the low light. So you can see the spots where the light comes out of the windows right there, and the house has a small glow through the red and the green in some areas, especially right here where the white is. You can see there's windows back here. So and it's weird how the camera keeps changing intensity based on the light coming out of it. There we go, it's not so bad. Lights are coming back. Okay, so this would be more of a worst case scenario rebuild. Normally the motor would come in the right direction, but if you find a cheaper motor and it's the wrong direction, that's one way to fix it. Reverse the two train cars. Unfortunately, I wasn't trying to break the Department 56 symbol off the front. That was an accident, and you can see it's glued back on, and you can barely even tell there was a problem. Actually, from the front you can't. That seam there is actually the seam from the light. You can see a little bit on the side, and that's about it. So that might happen. Hopefully it doesn't, because there's no way to take this off with that, unfortunately. Also, the train cars need to be in the back. I'll actually turn this off where it needs to be, so that way if it dies, you can hopefully spin the disc enough to do it so you can get the chimney off. You need to have the train cars like that. And that's so you can pull this off that stud. Technically, this down here is the place where it's glued. He might break it like I did. Like I said, that wasn't intentional. That's just, it happens. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, things happen. You have no control over. All you can do is try and rectify the situation. This case, since a lot of ceramic, unless you drop it, breaks cleanly, you have a nice clean area that you can then glue it back on, and the seam is almost invisible. Nobody will know. If it chips, you can try and match the silver as an example and repaint it. Let's hope that doesn't happen to you if you have this house. You will have to heat here and here to get this to separate. And this is one big piece, as you saw, with a big metal stud. You may have more luck of the stud coming out of the porcelain, but the porcelain probably was cast with the stud in it, so it's probably not going to pull out. The resin, on the other hand, it was glued into. When you get it hot, it's going to break the resin down and the glue, and then slide off. Once you get the motor out, as you saw how to do it, if you are going to replace the motor with a studded motor, if you can't find a threaded one, because I didn't know it was threaded, I thought it was studded until we pulled it out, meaning that I thought it had the threads were attached to the motor, not glued into the bottom of the disc. You saw this is one way of modifying it. Truthfully, if I had to do another one and I couldn't find a recessed motor where it has the threads into the bottom of the motor, I would probably let them know that I'm going to drill a hole and put a nut on the top that will fit inside one of the holes in here. And since the gap is so small, I'm going to turn on the flashlight so you can see. Since that gap is so small, you probably won't notice it. And before you glue the stack back on, you can take a Sharpie or a paintbrush and paint the nut gray or black. You know, gray for the track or black for the side of the stack here. Just to help it blend in if you're concerned, because most of the small nuts of this size are silver or brass in color. This one's got a what they call titanium tinge, so it's kind of a brass gold look. So a lot of the small nuts will be titanium colored, brass, or silver, but you can hit it with Sharpie and turn it black, or you can hit it with a paintbrush and turn it black or gray. They come in colors, both paints and Sharpies, of course, but that's probably the best way to do it. And I'm just doing that from the option I chose. I thought would be less invasive, minus the grinding of the output shaft from the motor, and I was wrong. It did take a little time. It technically, in theory, works, and it does work, as you see. Turn it back on, but it's more time consuming, and your probability of screwing something up is exponentially higher. So first time doing it, this is how I did it. If I have another one of these that comes through, which even where I got the motor, they'd never even heard of this piece. I never heard of it until it was dropped off for me to repair. I would probably just drill a hole and then countersink the top just a little bit to recess the nut into the plastic, and then glue the nut into the plastic, so when you thread the shaft, the nut's less likely to vibrate out. When I say glue it in, I'm just talking about a drop of super glue, not the threads, just the nut where it touches the plastic disc that's rotating. So on a moderate scale, this is going to be closer to moderate to hard as far as repair, because this is a very fragile house apparently, mainly because of this sign here. This is, like I said, kind of it's a resin, so you can shatter it, but yeah, probably not that much. Now if you do have this piece and it is kind of working and it's rubbing, let's say it's rubbing the back side of this chimney, if you take it apart One, you can either move the cars, or two, you can sand the back of the chimney down to give it a little bit more space. It is resin. You can use a sanding disc on a Dremel. You can use a file. You can use an emery board. You know, any type of abrasive material, and then you can repaint it or use a Sharpie and turn it black again. So even though it's like a one component, one motor, and not counting a light bulb, I'm sure you all know how to replace a light bulb. This is a more difficult house, and it's mainly because of this here. Getting this porcelain hot enough to break the glue, I thought worked, and it didn't, and it broke. But we have glue, we can fix it. I do keep paints on hand, both acrylic and like testers model paints, for different things. In case something like this happens, I try and color match it, so that way we can touch it up and make it look close to original. On bigger sections of houses, especially ones that have maybe been stored where the paint's flaking, I bought a couple of cheap airbrushes, which worked decently, surprisingly. Once I learned how to set the flow, they work great. So if you chip it, you can channel more of your artistic abilities and touch it up, or change it, you know, like I did with the Hideous Harry's factory many years ago, where I tore it apart, showed you how it worked, put it back together, and then I took the bright, vibrant colors and made it dark and dingy, because it's supposed to be a spooky house, not a happy place. So you do have choices. But anyhow, for as basic as this was a much longer video than I thought it would be, and it took me weeks to find a motor, and this is the closest motor I can find. I will link it below. It's from Happy Holiday Parts. It's the only motor that fit the dimensions of the original. Very important, because with this having a porcelain base, you can't go taller. You technically can't go shorter, but with shorter you can put a spacer in there. Glue a popsicle stick in. Something to take up the difference. But this is a very narrow motor, only about a 1/2 inch thick, and that is really thin. Most motors are about 3/4 of an inch thick. And even on the factory motor, you have to cut those wings off where the screws go to hold it into a normal housing. If you watch other videos, you would know what I'm referring to when they come with the wings on the sides, which is very common for synchronous motors because they're high torque, so they have usually 4 holes. The smaller ones will have 2 holes, 1 on each side, versus 2 on each side. So as far as this goes, give it a whirl. Just try not to shatter the house. Take your time. If you don't have a heat pen like I do, there's a thing here that's attached to this cord, heat gun. A hair dryer probably isn't going to get hot enough to separate anything on here, to be honest. This is using very strong resin, so it's going to have to be really hot. Like I said, I think I took my machine up to 480 degrees Celsius, like 900 and some degrees Fahrenheit. You are talking, you know, cooking your food temperatures. Some porcelain houses you can throw in the oven. This one I wouldn't, because of that rotating disc. It's plastic. The trains, cars are plastic, and it's a sticker on top of the plastic. The train track in the gray is a sticker. The rest of the house technically could survive being thrown in the oven to separate the glue. But at the same token, if you get in your oven to separate the glue, you're also probably going to change the color of your snow. It's not going to be white. It's going to be brown or tan. It's going to be burnt, basically. It's going to melt. So heat gun, you can get a single heat pen, like what I use, not attached to a machine, but a single with the tips. And I think I have a link for one. I'll put it below. But you can get it at Amazon, Harbor Freight. I've never seen one at Home Depot or Lowe's, but I have seen them at Harbor Freight. But I own another one that's a freestanding pen that looks just like this, but it says Craftsman, and then it has high, medium, and low settings for the heat and the fan speed. And I got it at the garage sale, so I don't even know where it came from originally. I would say Sears because Craftsman, but you never know. So anyhow, this is the Toot's train here. As you can see, she's been running this whole time without any issues. Your biggest issue is just the alignment. Make sure that if you have this piece and you take it apart, pop a new motor in it, that you get that disc aligned and that stack aligned, as you saw I had a failure where I did not get it lined up and had to redo it, which tacked on with cure time another 3 to 4 hours. Let me see, what time is it? A little over 4 hours, matter of fact, with the cure time of the this. I did the low end setting on this Gorilla Glue. So I'm going to let it sit on my bench for another 20 hours before I put it back in its box, just to ensure that chimney is cured and it won't move, because it does have to take a trip. And I prefer it to show up at the other end of its trip still attached and not bouncing around, breaking the train cars or breaking the light back off. I would stick with this piece with the resin style glues like this, and the Gorilla glues, super glues like these. I don't care if you use Gorilla. I found Gorilla works the best. It has a little bit better working time, and if you add moisture, it does actually help it bond better or faster. And you can use the activators too. I have tried the crazy glues and the super glues and the Loctite glues, and I've not had as much success as I do with the Gorilla. And the only other Gorilla glue I use, which you wouldn't use on this, is the spray adhesive. I'm not sponsored by them because the glue sticks I use are SureBonder. They work better than the Gorilla. And the adhesive I used for my Halloween room is Loctite. I found it worked better than the Gorilla. So Gorilla makes good products, but I test them all. I've worked on so many of these miniature houses. I test all the different materials that are out there, and I use what works best for me. Your use may vary because of climate. Mine is a hotter, drier climate most of the year. We live about 3 feet from the surface of the sun about 6 months of the year, and I found that the Gorilla Glues handle it better than the Loctites and the other ones. And as far as SureBonder, it has to get hotter in the hot glue factory, or the hot glue gun, sorry, not factory. I wasn't supposed to fall. But anyway, nothing broke. It was just a metal coat hanger I bend for fishing wire. Anyhow, the SureBonder has a higher temperature, so it can handle the higher heats out here when you put it in storage, if you store them in a place that gets hot, over the other glues. So you can use the advice I have or not. It doesn't matter. Use what works best for you. I know a lot of people use that E9000. I've never had luck with it. That's just me. I do have a tube of it somewhere. It's buried in the mess on top of my bench, or it's in a box behind me on the rack of parts. But I just never had the same luck as other people. But that's why we try and find what works best for you. And in this case, make sure that you use a super glue that's really strong and a resin glue that's really strong. And that way, hopefully, be another 20 years or so before you have to work on it again. But anyway, any comments, questions, put them below. If you have any suggestions that might make this easier that I may have missed, because more eyes on a problem can come up with more solutions that you may not see, put them below. Well, I take suggestions all the time. I've had people suggest things that I've tried and it actually worked better than the way I found out to do it. And that's what makes a community great. You help each other, you succeed, and keep it going. So anyway, thanks for watching this really long video if you got to the end. And until the next one.